Hello, everybody, and welcome to what should be a wonderful journey. It's going to be exciting. Hopefully, this will be something we'll be doing for a long time. This is the sprint. So, for those who are not familiar, wondering what's going on, this is a new talk show that we have put together. I have these wonderful co-hosts with me. We have on the right next to me, we have JHobz.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, go ahead. Just hey, it's cool.
I was just saying, I'm really excited about this. I think we're going to have a blast. This is a show we're going to be doing every 2 weeks, and we're going to talk about a lot of speedrunning. We're going to have some pretty cool segments, I think. So I'm excited to get going.
Yeah. And then right below me, we have Frozentrually. Also, we're just going to call him Frozen for the rest of the day. So just...
Yeah, nobody ever calls me by the full name. Nobody ever says it right. That's like the second time, like in the past month, I've heard it said correctly. Yeah, looking forward to this. It's gonna be great.
Sweet. So, what are we going to be doing over the course of these shows? So, like JHobz said, we're going to be doing the show once every other week. So it's going to be Tuesdays at 8 p.m. Every other Tuesday at 8 p.m. And we're just going to be talking about speedrunning, really. So a few different focus things. We're going to be talking about like what's happening around the community. That's the news of the week, if you will. Like the latest and greatest that's happening in the community. We're going to be talking about things that are on our mind. Not necessarily news, but just like things that you've personally been watching and you kind of want to highlight, whether it just happened, or is happening right now, or maybe will be happening. And then we're also going to have some, lighthearted segments. I don't want to spoil what we got for you in store this week, but it's a good one. I'm a fan. We're also going to be kind of showing off some clips, the good, the bad, the ugly. But the clips, I mean, you guys know what clips are all about. Sometimes they're funny, sometimes they're great, sometimes they're just a train wreck. And that's what you're going to see. And also our biggest feature each show. So we're going to break down a run. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a world record run, but in most cases, you will see world record runs being displayed of a different game from show to show. We're not going to, show the same game, or at least not try to. And we're going to have a special guest on each show to kind of, help us break it down. Kind of ask the questions about what happened here, how did they do this, what went well, what went wrong. It just kind of give you a sense of like, each game that we do each week, like, how this run came to be. So that's kind of a basic overview of the show. It's going to be nice and lighthearted. Expect it to be an hour and a half, 2 hours long, something like that. Sometimes it'll be shorter, sometimes it'll be longer because we're just can't stop talking. Yeah. That just happens.
We're just going to kind of be BSing around with each other.
Exactly. So that's kind of the basic overview of the show. At the end of the show, we're going to kind of link a feedback form. So if you have any like suggestions, or if you think you like something, didn't like something, feel free to let us know, because this is very much like a beta test of it. Even the layouts are like kind of temporary right now. We're kind of like just going through the emotions, trying to see what works, what doesn't. We're going to definitely have different layouts in the future, but for now, this is definitely just a beta test. So please let us know what you think. We will post a feedback link at the end of the show. So, with that said in mind, we just kind of let's introduce ourselves. So, you know what, JHobz, I want to start with you. Go ahead. Just let the world know, who are you?
Sure. Yeah, so I'm JHobz. I've been speedrunning since August of 2014. You might know me for doing interviews at Games Done Quick events and stuff. And I speedrun a large variety of different games, Crash Bandicoot, Kingdom Hearts, Portal, Ori and the Blind Forest, lately SpiderMan PS4. We might talk about that a little bit later. But yeah, basically I can continue to talk until Darkman stops me. And so at length about any topic. So I think that's why I'm here, just for my ability to filibuster.
that's you mean you're here just for me to just make you stop talking, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. All right, Frozen, why don't you go ahead?
So I'm Frozentrually. I speedrun. Well, I used to speedrun Pepsi Man, Tesla Grad, and I call them children's early developmental point-and-click adventure games from the early to mid-90s, aka humongous entertainment games, Putt Putt, Spy Fox, Pajama Sam, Freddy Fish. So,
only the highest quality of games from Frozen.
Of course. I mean, come on now. And you probably don't know me by face, but if you watch GDQs, I am Pepsi Man. So
the legendary one.
The rest of me from, at the very least, not the face.
just, I mean, come on, tell me nobody, like, if you're in chat right now and you don't know the legend of Pepsi Man, you just literally have to pull up a VOD of the Pepsi Man runs from either of the GDQs that it's been in, and you will know immediately what he's talking about. This is just a wonderful thing. So yeah, so as for me, I'm Darkman78. Basically, I've been in the speedrunning community for a very long time. It's been like 8 years or something like that. It's been a while, but you know, mostly known for running Mega Man games, in particular Mega Man 5. I also do work for GDQ like JHobz. You will find me interviewing people from time to time, and I also run the social media for Games Done Quick during the events. Aside from that, I kind of like watching any and all sorts of speed runs, you know, from wonderful, you know, runs that like everybody knows, like, you know, such brilliant stuff as Pepsi Man, and you know, also some high profile, you know, games like Final Fantasy 7, like Final Fantasy 7 and Pepsi Man, they're like the same thing, right? So I like anything and everything. And it's just really fun to talk about speedrunning in this context. So yeah, I think that's pretty much us three. So I think without further ado, want to just kind of get into this?
Yeah, now that we know everybody, let's get into our first segment here. We're going to just kind of talk about the news of the week or 2 weeks, or since it's the first episode, any news from the past, you know, 3 years. And I think the first thing we're going to get into is pretty obvious. GDQX just happened pretty recently. GDQ Express, for anyone who didn't catch it, it was a weekend event at TwitchCon, a shorter GDQ than what we're used to. And I think out of the three of us, Darkman, you were the only one actually attending, right?
Yes.
So I think the cool thing to kick us off with this is, as someone who's been to a lot of GDQs, as we all have, what was different about GDQX? Like, what did you really like that was different from the normal GDQ experience?
Honestly, I think my favorite part about it is the fact that we got to see like so many people in the crowd that would never come to a GDQ. Either A, they just, you know, don't know or don't have the means to come to a GDQ, or B, they didn't even realize like attending GDQ was a thing, or like they didn't even realize like speedrunning is a thing they would like. But because of TwitchCon, they were there and kind of watching like, you know, what was going on. Like, man, our streaming was packed. Like, well, after the first day was a little bit slow, kind of people, you know, spreading the word. Also, TwitchCon had their issues with people getting in. But like once the first day passed, like the room was pretty much packed almost 24/7. It was great. Like so many people came and they were loving it, and that was honestly like that's my favorite thing about it. Just the fact that we were able to kind of like bring this to like people who would never otherwise get to experience it.
That's kind of the beauty of an event like TwitchCon as a whole. There's I have a number of friends who used to speedrun and are no longer do that. Maybe they've gone back to, they do like variety casting, and they were able to go to TwitchCon, so they were able to go back to a GDQ that they haven't gone to in a long time.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I really hope that like it happens again in the future. We don't know yet. It seemed like we got a pretty good reception, and of course, raising, what was it, like 150,000 or so?
139,000.
139,000. So close. 139,000 for charity. That's never anything to to like, you know, shun. So like that was super cool. For me, like watching from home, it was weird because I haven't done that in several years now. I've been at the most recent GDQs, right. And I think some of the I just want to immediately jump into like some of the standout runs for me. Tropical Freeze was pretty good. I got to shout out Spike, of course. That was super fun. But more important than Tropical Freeze was the Pacross S2 speed run done immediately after by I can't remember his name at the moment, but it's like
Brian Otto.
Yes, Brian Otto.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. But also, I really liked getting to catch some more of the kind of graveyard shift runs, because I hadn't been. I was like up in the middle of the night throughout most of it. Probably just staying awake because of GDQX, and I got to catch some cool stuff like Chippendale Rescue Rangers, which I don't normally get to see. That was an awesome run. Uranium Anchor also did a really cool run in Metal Storm, I think. Like it was just great. Yeah, it was great getting to see all these runs that I know have been around GDQs before, a lot of them anyways, but I haven't always been able to catch because there's a week long of stuff, and I'm also doing interviews and everything. So it was really cool being able to kind of like sit back and catch some runs that I had absolutely no idea what they were going to be like.
Yeah, when you're at a GDQ, it's typically tough to catch a lot of runs. You're bouncing between so many different things, but then if you're watching at home, you can catch every single thing that you possibly want to because you can completely no life it and stay up all night.
Yeah, pretty much. What about you guys? What were some standout runs?
My personal favorite, I'm a little bit biased here. Is late night Friday or essentially Saturday, we had the Beyblade run.
Oh,
This
yeah.
is, yeah, this is a little known Game Boy Advance game that was run by 360 Chrism. And I happened to be on the couch for that. And we basically turned it into it was not only a great run, but it was also we turned it into a spectacle. So that was fantastic. Chrism PB'd, so I mean, you can't really ask for anything more than that.
I think he
yeah,
PB'd at ESA when he did it the first time too, because he doesn't run it all that much.
it's fair.
I think I woke up in the middle of the night to that run. Like I'd fallen asleep watching GDQX, woke up to it, and I was just like, I think I need to stay awake for this. I think I need to stay up for this run. It did not disappoint. You're right.
Personally, I love the Super Mario Odyssey race. That was fantastic. They both put on such a fantastic show, and it was a treat to watch. And it's one of the more up-and-coming runs in general. Not even up-and-coming, one of the more popular runs right now. We're going to be seeing a lot of that coming up, too.
Oh, yeah.
How was it, too, to see that? Because that was at SGDQ, but not as a race. How was it to see that switch from solo to race so quickly? Kind of with it fresh in your mind. I mean, you probably watched a bunch of Odyssey runs, but was it easier to like follow to a degree?
So it was nice because of the commentary. The commentary was pretty different on the race because the runners are way more concentrated on doing their run during the race and they have their backup commentators doing most of it. So Spike and Trihex on this one killed it, did great commentary.
That's cool.
That's cool.
Other stuff about GDQX though, like I noticed like things were running pretty smoothly a lot of the time. Like I think it was ahead of schedule for quite a while. And in general, like Darkman, again, since you were the one there, how did things feel from behind the scenes at this event, especially being just so different from the normal, all right, we have a full week to work on everything?
A big part of the issue, or I said a big part that was kind of a glaring issue for us, is we didn't really have too many people actually working on the event. It was a lot like smaller in terms of staff and volunteer capacity, which big shout out to our volunteers. Without them, this event probably wouldn't have happened, just like any other GDQ. Without the volunteers, these events don't happen. So they always deserve a thanks. But yeah, like it was a bit tough. Like some people had to work like as many as like 12-hour shifts. So it was quite rough. But it was a lot like, there's a lot of good out of it too. It was like a very like the stream room was a lot smaller than like a typical GDQ. So like as a result, it kind of took you back to like those like the older days. Not quite like the 2011s, of sorts, but like it felt a lot more homey, I guess. Like to kind of walk into that room, like probably had maybe 150, 200 seats, something like that at most. So way different than like the GDQs now, where we have like 400 or 500 seats minimum. So it was a nice feel to it, and I think things ran for the most part pretty smoothly. We had some issues, we had some interesting audio issues, as I'm sure you're all aware of if you watch the Tropical Freeze run.
Yeah,
caused that.
But I don't think the stream even had to go down at any point because of it being such a short marathon and everything. So that was that was cool.
We had to take it down once because 48 hours, it's the Twitch limit. But other than that, pretty much kept the stream up, so it was good. It was definitely a lot of positives, and just overall, like I said, just kind of being in the event, like it was definitely an interesting feeling being part of like a bigger thing rather than just being your own thing.
Right.
Like just like you go outside of the room and all of a sudden like things are just completely different, right? It's not like obviously like when you go from like a GDQ stream room like at a normal event to like outside, things are different, but like you still feel like you're in your element, and then all of a sudden like now, when going to TwitchCon, and like as soon as you come out, it's just everything just feels different. Not that that's a bad thing. It's just something that you kind of have to get used to.
Instead of 2,500 speedrunning nerds, when you walk around, now you're seeing 10,000 Twitch nerds. So it's a bigger audience, right?
Yeah, exactly. A little bit different. Yeah, when I went to CaliThon 2 years ago, I think it was at an anime convention, and walking out of the stream room into an anime convention is very disconcerting versus walking into a room with a bunch of CRTs and playing video games with some friends.
Right. It's got to be pretty different, but I'm sure there's a lot of crossover.
Absolutely.
So I know, for me, I would love to go to another one. So I totally want to see another GDQX happen if it can logistically and all that noise. Obviously we're not, we can't say whether it's going to happen right now or not. But I would love. I'm kind of curious, like if you guys have any thoughts of if GDQ X could be like at any event in the future, like if it weren't necessarily TwitchCon for some reason, we wanted to do it again, but we couldn't go to TwitchCon or something. What event would you guys like to see it at to kind of like, meld those different groups? Like, and I'll start for me. I would love to see a GDQX at like a PAX.
Yeah.
Because I think that would be crazy. Just suddenly, first of all, you have so many vendors, like so many indie game devs and stuff who are going to watch their game get broken probably on stage. But also we take that TwitchCon audience that you were talking about and turn it into an even broader audience. You get so many more people who aren't familiar with speedrunning. I think that'd just be super cool.
And extending off of that, it would be really cool to, if it got popular enough at a PAX, I feel like that's almost a stepping stone, but going to like Comic-Con,
wow,
that's going to like the ultimate level of exposure, and that would be insane. That like imagine it at San Diego Comic-Con, just like on the floor, just having a whole bunch of seats with a gigantic screen. That would be awesome.
And the other thing is like everybody cosplays at Comic-Cons, right? Like there's so many people, so that would be really interesting too. Just walk out and just immediately tons of costumes.
Well, you took my answers. I got nothing.
All
right, I would just go the opposite way. I want to put it in the middle of nowhere where nobody will go.
There you go.
Mikey Yama's basement.
Yeah, back to Mikey Yama's
all the way back.
Just take it way back. All right, cool. Well, anybody have any last thoughts on GDQX before we kind of move on to some other news of the time period or anything?
If you missed any, videos are going up on YouTube as we speak, and more of them will be coming over the coming days, so watch them.
Yeah, I missed the Odyssey race, so I'm super excited to go check that one out.
Yeah, I missed the pit cross, and I need to do that.
That one, you even get the, like on YouTube, it'll have the exclusive, few minutes of black screen that showed up during the live stream of him just Spike playing Picross. Well, cool. Let's move on then. The next thing we want to talk about is there's a game that came out pretty recently that was somewhat of a surprise to a lot of people, and that was Deltarune, which was the sequel to Undertale, for anybody who doesn't know. We're not going to get into spoilers, so don't worry about that. But Undertale kind of like by surprise completely swept the speedrunning scene by storm. So Deltarune probably going to jump on that same bandwagon, I would imagine.
Probably. The fan base will do something with it.
Yeah.
And also, I don't think any of us could even do Deltarune spoilers if we wanted to, so don't worry about that.
Yeah. I don't think any of us have played the game, so you're safe.
I probably will, though. Seems neat.
Yeah, I mean, like, obviously, like, Undertale is such a, beloved game by so many, so it's like HobZ said, it was very interesting to see Undertale develop as, like, this genuine speed game that's not only just like, oh, hey, people are speedrunning this because they can, but more so that, like, this is a really good speed game. There's so much tech to it. There's so many interesting facets about it as a speed run, and that's why, like, not only has it's been in GDQ multiple times because of that. So I'm kind of curious to see how the sequel ends up.
Absolutely.
Of course, for those who are not aware, Undertale, the original game, it was not at a GDQ for a long time because Toby Fox, the creator, wished that it wouldn't be there, so that way, like, people who haven't had a chance to experience this game would be able to. So that may play again, depending on what happens with Deltarune, which I totally understand. Like, that makes sense. Like, if you're a creator of a game and, like, you want people to experience your game, you want to try to limit the exposure as much as possible so people don't get ruined by it. Totally makes sense. I do not blame him at all for that. So I think that very well might play out, like, with Deltarune as well. But I'll be curious to see. I know, like, I've been seeing, like, on the speedrun Reddit, that people are already posting times for Deltarune, so people are clearly interested in speedrunning it. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Ignore whatever just happened with my lights, by the way.
That was really
that was really weird. The thing for me, I think that's interesting about Deltarune too, is that it came out of nowhere. Like I mentioned before, like it was like a couple days notice, or maybe even just a day's notice before it was out there and it was ready to play. And I wonder, because we've kind of gotten into this cycle of games get like announced and then super hyped up for years in advance a lot of the time. And then sometimes there's delays, sometimes there's not, whatever. But a lot of that hype kind of builds up, and you start seeing all these trailers, and you wonder, okay, from a speedrunning aspect, I mean, we all do it, even if you try not to. It's like you start thinking, how am I going to be able to apply that mechanic from the trailer, right? Like how I can't even play the game yet, but I'm already thinking about how to speedrun it and how to break it. And with Deltarune, you didn't like have that, wasn't a thing, right? I think that's like really interesting, really like different. And I think it kind of maybe
It's kind of a nice change of pace.
yeah, it like makes it maybe a little more fresh with the speedrunning. There wasn't a demo that popped up that you could start doing. Like Mega Man 11 runs already had some stuff found before it was even out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Would you guys like to see more of that in the future from devs? Or do you think it's just kind of like, obviously it's probably a big risk to just release something?
It's not a good thing, because the thing is, he's not selling this, right? If he were trying to sell this, it would be the exact opposite of what he would want to do.
Right.
But the fact that it was a free game, he can do whatever he wants with it, and that's a good thing. And I like that he just released it without any hype around it. But honestly, if he were selling it, I would think he would be doing himself a disservice by not hyping it up at least a little bit, even a week before.
Sure. And, chat makes a good comment that, like, I think you can almost consider this, since, this isn't a complete game, or at least Toby Fox doesn't seem to imply it's a complete game. It almost seems like he's releasing a demo of a game rather than like, a full-fledged game. So to that extent, maybe this is like the demo of it. And, this is only a teaser of what's to come. But who knows? I mean, it seems like an experience that people kind of like enjoyed for like itself, and not just like, okay, this is a demo of what's to come. So I don't know. I mean, I guess it's up to each person how they see it.
Well, I think it's really cool to just at least go gameplay first, right, with the release of the demo immediately, and not have all this speculation off the trailer and stuff like that. Yeah. I'm one of those people who I'll watch like the first trailer of stuff, and then I'll avoid everything after that, so that my mind doesn't start building it up, or I don't start like speculating like crazy and stuff.
You don't No Man's Sky yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is a good game now, by the way.
Oh, is it? Okay, cool.
It is.
All right, well, let's I think we can move on now. We wanted to talk a little bit about something that's been merging pretty recently. I would say within the last like couple of years, but especially within the last like 6 months or so. And that's seeing like speedrunning have this kind of tie-in to esports to a degree. Especially like seeing a lot of esports teams start signing popular speedrun streamers, stuff like that. And Darkman, I think probably a little bit more about this than I do.
Sure. So basically, the way the news ties into this week is Fire Dragon, who's he's a speedrunner. He's done things like Luigi's Mansion, Super Mario Sunshine, various other games that probably doesn't come to my mind right now. He announced that he had signed with Team Liquid Media, just basically the media like hub of Team Liquid. So it's not like a direct signing with the team, but still like basically related to the team, right? Like. So this is just a string of like signings by speedrunners with esports teams over the last year. Like you're talking about like CLG has 4 speedrunners that they've signed over the past few months. Beast Coast is a team that has a few speedrunners signed to it. ALG, another team that is signed by that has like 4 people attached to it. And if people aren't familiar with Beast Coast or ALG, Beast Coast is a newly formed esports team that has like Smash roots, but ALG is also like backed by Optic, so I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with that team. So it's a pretty big thing to see a lot of big people get into it. And obviously, of course, Trihex has been signed by Tempo Storm for a while, so that's been a thing. So yeah, there's been a huge resurgence in like kind of people being signed to teams now, and it's pretty exciting. Like
and like the Allegiance guys come down to Texas in the Dallas area where Allegiance is based. They'll come down here and film media sponsorship type things, promotional videos. They're doing, it's esports. That's what esports players do. I don't know where it'll go in terms of actual esports competitions, but I'm interested to see what everybody's thinking, because esports has to have a reason for investing into players.
Yeah, and that's what I'm like really excited to see too, is the thing that excites me about sponsorships in general, but especially signing on to a regular sponsorship with a team or whatever, is how you can create new types of content that you couldn't have done before, because you now have financial backing to do it. And so getting to see little mini events like you're talking about, where they fly everybody into the same place, because normally they're distributed all across the country and sometimes, you know, across the world. Being able to see them all come to one place more often to have, you know, fun little races or mini tournaments, stuff like that. That is, I think, something that's super cool. Getting to see a lot more 2P1C content, or 2-player 1-controller races for people who aren't familiar. But yeah, I want to see, like you alluded to, Frozen, I want to see kind of where that goes in the grand scheme of like larger events too, you know, larger competitions.
And I think, not to be outdone, as kind of, I guess, didn't really have a chance to explain this, or I kind of forgot, but basically, like, you know, people, they watch GDQ and they think, wow, this is huge, right? Like, there's so many people watching, you know, this event, so that must mean there's like a huge speedrun community, right? Not really. Like, a speedrunning community as a whole, like outside of GDQs, is very tiny, relatively speaking. It has a very entrenched fan base. They're, you know, they're very passionate, and, you know, the speedrunners itself, of course, are very passionate. So, you know, when people think like speedrunning, you know, they don't think of it like, you know, a big esports game, right? Like, it's not full of like thousands of teams, you know, all the organizations trying to get a team and whatnot. No, it's not like that. It's a very organic thing. You know, there's not that inherent like competition aspect to it. There obviously is a competition, but it's like, it's not this like thing that's very obvious to viewers. So, you know, as a result, like, you wouldn't think that, like, you know, maybe like it's speedrunning isn't that type of big thing that deserves this type of support. But I think organizations are starting to kind of see that, like, hey, there's maybe something we can do here. You know, like, I think you know, maybe some of its downsides may be the positives that the organization's seen it. The fact that it has this dedicated fan base that otherwise may not like watch the esports things. Like, you know, just anecdotally speaking, I know a lot of people that I talk to in the speedrun community, like, when they're on Twitch, that's pretty much all they're watching. Just like speedrunners or people who used to speedrun, just like those sort of things. They're not really branching out a lot into esports. So, you know, this is kind of like, I guess, an opportunity for these organizations to reach an audience that they otherwise may not.
I think it's cool too that competitive events that are going to build out of that, because of the nature of it being pretty different, are going to have to be more creative in like how they're structured and stuff, right? Like, it's fairly easy to put together a tournament in terms of logistics because you're just doing head-to-head races a lot. But I think there's going to be a lot of different formats that are going to pop up too that aren't just straight up head-to-head race of the full game all the time.
Sure.
So I think that's cool. All right. Well, the next piece of like news that we wanted to talk about a little bit was that recently Super Meat Boy actually got a new TAS for 106%, I think is the category. And it's super cool. If you haven't seen it, it is like unbelievably cool. Basically, the interesting thing about TASs, if you're not familiar, tool assisted speedruns, is that generally the TAS will be like 5 minutes faster or 10 minutes faster or whatever than the current world record. And that will be often seen as like, oh, wow, yeah, that's insane, because there's no way, you know, we're hoping to bring the world record down 5 seconds at a time, or maybe 20 seconds if we're lucky, and a full minute in a year and a half or whatever, right? And so when you see a tool assisted speedrun, which can basically do it perfectly, more or less, you expect it to be 5 or 6 minutes or whatever ahead. This new task is 20 minutes faster than the record, which is what's absolutely insane about it. And I know I got the chance to watch it. I think Frozen, you got the chance to watch it too, right? Give me your first impressions on it, because I think it was.
I mean, so I used to watch a lot of Super Meat Boy, and it's been probably like a year or so since I checked up on it. I haven't watched 106 in almost 2 years probably, but good God, some of the strats that they use in that are, you barely even see a room before it's over. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's insane. I'm going to go ahead and give Darkman a link too, so you can post it in the chat for anybody who's curious what we're talking about exactly. But basically, it, like, one of the cool things about it is with TASs, you can have strats that are just so unbelievably precise that you just can't realistically do them as a human when playing the game. So one of the strats I believe that they use is they take one of the characters, one of the unlockable characters, and they're able to like zip through all these walls and stuff. So Super Meat Boy, a game that's like not incredibly broken in the grand scheme of things, right? A lot of it is just down to optimizing every single level and every single bit of every single level and just trying to perform that as best you can and avoid deaths and stuff like that. it's neat getting to see that game kind of broken more wide open, and what happens when you apply those zips into a game that hasn't really had them before.
Yeah. I'm gonna go ahead and show my old man speedrunning roots right here. Like, I remember when I first started watching speedrunning. Like, I remember it was like GDQ 12 or 13, I want to say. It was Breakdown doing a speedrun of Super Meat Boy 106%. I believe the estimate was like 2 hours and 20 minutes or something like that. So it's kind of crazy. Like, I haven't really watched Super Meat Boy a lot since then, but it's kind of crazy for me to think that this game is now down to 48 minutes. Obviously, it's a task. A lot of these things, players aren't necessarily able to do because, for those not familiar, tool-assisted speedrun will literally look at a run just frame by frame. So they'll go at each individual frame, and there's 60 frames in a second. That's not really something a player can do. However, there are certainly strategies that players can incorporate. So, just kind of like that old man's perspective, for me to see this game that fast, it's actually insane. I didn't think it could ever be this fast. It's cool.
Yeah, I think the current world record is in the 1 hour, 12-minute range or something by a human. So, but the other exciting thing about this, more than just the novelty of it, right, is that whenever a new TAS is released for a game, inevitably more and more strats from that TAS end up showing up in the run, because people get crazier and they start really implementing these insanely precise strats, and they practice them and practice them and practice them and end up getting good at them and getting consistent. So I'm really curious to see where this game that's been around for a while now, where it goes now that this TAS has been released. I wonder if more people pick it up because they saw it and they're interested, or B, just the current runners, how they start adapting some newer strats that they might not have thought of doing before. Well, cool. We're going to move on then. We're going to talk now about some tournaments that are going on, because there are, for a lot of people who aren't familiar, who maybe watch the GDQs, and that's kind of most of the speedrunning that they watch, maybe catch Hotfix every now and then. There are tournaments going on all the time in speedrunning, largely in part due to Speed Gaming, that series of channels really picking up and running a lot more tournaments. And so we wanted to just talk about a few of them, kind of let you know about a couple others that are maybe coming up. So one that is really exciting for me that has been going on recently is the Ori and the Blind Forest randomizer, which, again, that's almost a topic in its own thing, that randomizers have now started showing up in so many different games. It's not just Link to the Past anymore. And the Ori randomizer finals, grand finals, there are actually 2 tournaments running simultaneously, and one just had its grand finals, and the singles tournament is actually having them next weekend, or this weekend rather. So I'm super excited for that personally. That's going to be happening on the Speed Gaming channels, and it's something that people have been working at. A lot of the entrants in the tournament have been working at for years now, like 2, 3, some even more than that, 4 years, right, basically since the game's release. I guess it hasn't quite been 4 years. It's close to 4 years. And it's really cool to see that really kind of start to hit its pinnacle, right?
Pinnacle? Are you saying this is it?
So randomizers,
no, pinnacle being
just the top.
Are you saying it's only downhill from here?
No. It's pinnacle so far. It's okay. When you get to the top of a mountain and you look over the peak and there's just another hill right there.
Okay, all
right. We're just making Celeste references now.
Yeah, exactly. Well, speaking of which, why don't you tell us about the next one, Frozen?
So the Celeste Grand Finals, did they just start? I think I think you know a little bit more about the timings of that, JHobz.
Yeah, so they had a double elimination tournament, and actually today, right before this broadcast, they had the losers finals portion of it, which was Oddbod versus TGH, who almost got world record twice in a best of 3.
1 second off from his PB, right?
Yeah, 1 second off from it, and then 6 seconds off. Actually ended up taking that 2-0, and is now going to be back in the winner's bracket, because he actually got knocked down by Flatterby, and he has to now fight his way back into it. So he's going to be racing against Flatterby again up in the grand finals, and we'll see when that gets scheduled. But it should be really exciting whenever it happens. Speedgaming.org is the place to go to check for schedule stuff for that. I know we got another like several tournaments coming up, but there's like, I just want to list quickly a couple that are kind of in really interesting parts of their tournaments at the moment. And just to give you an idea of like how many are going on all the time. Shovel Knight Low Percent is really close to its finals. There's Super Mario Galaxy Luigi Any Percent tournament that is really close to the winter finals right now. There's so many randomizers: Zelda 1 rando, Mega Man 2 rando, Link to the Past rando, fall tournament, German tournament, Spanish tournament. The French one just ended, I think. There's so many really cool tournaments going on at the moment that you'll want to check out for sure. And the Momodora Grand Finals are happening now too. There's even a Chrono Trigger tournament, man. It's nuts. There's
There's a tournament for everything. So many communities now organize these things. It's, if you want to watch a tournament, there's probably one on.
Mm-hmm. And there's a really cool one coming up to the Super Mario Odyssey Darker Side tournament. Signups just closed on that. So it should be starting, like, I mean, they might have even had a match today.
I think it's today that it actually starts.
Yeah, so people will be scheduling those, and that should be super cool, because we've seen like a couple of Odyssey tournaments already, even though it's still a pretty recent game. We've seen some 80% tournaments, but I think this is the first Darker Side tournament, which is a much longer category for that game. It should be really interesting to see how that plays out throughout the whole tournament. Well, cool. We're going to move into our next segment then, I think, which is we need your help. This is why we need feedback, because we need your help naming this, like giving it a better name than it is. Right now we're calling it Checking In, because we're going to check in a little bit with the hosts. And what the idea behind this segment is that we are going to just talk about whatever has been interesting to us recently. It might be a brand new game that has come out and is, really cool for speedrunning. It might just be what we've personally been speedrunning lately, or it might be something from 1985 that we just happened to recently see some speedruns of. Or sometimes every now and then it'll also just be like, hey, I caught this really interesting run at GDQX or what have you, whatever marathon that we saw something at, and it's just our chance to talk about that stuff. So I'm going to throw it over to Darkman first.
Fine, just let me do it.
Yeah.
You're going to see a consistent theme this weekend, I promise, or this week rather, but we promise it wasn't intentional. So I want to start off by saying, for those who are not aware, Mega Man 11 released early last month. I'm a little bit of a Mega Man fan, so I might have been expecting it just a tad, but a fantastic game. For those who haven't played it, definitely recommend it. But yeah, to no one's surprise, the speedrunning scene has kind of picked up. With Mega Man 11, and it's been really fun, kind of like watching the process of it, seeing what the runners are kind of come up with literally every day. Like, huge drafts are getting posted in the Discord. People are really getting into it, and finally the competition scene, has really started to develop. Two notable runners, top runners, have been kind of trading the world record back and forth over the past few weeks, and that's Fast at CC and QTT6. So Fast at CC is an American runner. He currently holds the world record. I believe that's 34, 36 at this time. And then QTT6 is a Taiwanese runner who's he's been in the Mega Man community for a long time. It was like 3 or 4 years now. And he's kind of, just really pushing the game. Like, every day he's like going at it for like, 8, 9, 10 hours, it seems like, each stream. He's like really putting a lot of time in. Fast is streaming like every day. Like, it's funny. Like, I'll wake up in the morning, and then since QTT is obviously a Taiwanese runner, he's going to be streaming, when I wake up. So I'm waking up, I'm watching QTT, and then after he's done, it seems like almost immediately Fast goes live. So it's really cool. You
just 24 hours of content.
Yeah. How do you get anything done?
I don't. Yeah, it's crazy. Like, the two have been like trading the world record back and forth over the last 2 weeks. Like, I remember, like, at one point, like 3 days in a row, which is literally one day QTT had it, and Fast maybe got it like that night or the next day, and then QTT gets it the next day, and then the Fast gets it. It's insane. But not only that, like, even just now things are starting to take shape. Like, some of the other runners are kind of getting into it. They're really like learning the game and getting used to things. They're finding new strats. So it's a very, very interesting landscape with Mega Man 11 right now, and I'm really curious to see like what happens with this game.
Yeah, as someone who played the game and was not like super crazy about it, to be honest, but that's also because I'm bad at Mega Man games, I was blown away by even just the little bits of the speedrun that I've seen so far, because I haven't watched like a full run. I need to sit down and do that. But it's it's super cool. Just they're like the weapons that are in this game are unbelievably powerful, and there is a quick swap that you can do between them. So being able to like see them swap weapons so quickly to be able to just completely use their entire arsenal in any level is super cool.
As someone who hasn't even played a single Mega Man game ever, the tech in Mega Man games is always just so interesting to watch, and the communities behind them really build out the speedruns so well.
Yeah, and this is a modern one, so it's nuts that it's still like that, like great for it, that awesome. Because a lot of times you see people stick to like Mega Man 2, Mega Man 3, Mega Man X, but really cool. All right, well, I'll talk about like what what's kind of been interesting to me lately, and that is that SpiderMan PS4 came out recently, or Marvel's Spider-Man is the full title of the game, and I did like 100% playthrough of that game in like 3 days because it was super fun. But it's such an unbelievably fun speed run because it just nails the feel of Spider-Man, and there is a gigantic variety to the movement tech in the game, and that would be right immediately where you think, okay, that is enough for that game to be super cool. But on top of that, the combat system in that game is even higher, I would say, like than the movement. Like I would say it has even more depth to it, especially since New Game Plus just released, and speedruns of that are only now just starting to kind of like, shape up, and those are going to be super cool because it's like when you're playing Mega Man 11 or whatever, and you've now gotten all of the powers. Hello, lights. You've now gotten all of the powers, and you get to start that way, and it's just like you can completely optimize every single fight, and it's nuts. There's also a super hard difficulty that got released recently that I found very fun, and I think it's great, but it is a game that like has some small like pacing issues, but it's one that I would love to see more people pick up. There are some cutscenes that aren't skippable because they're actually disguising load screens, so it's kind of a trade-off. Instead of seeing a load screen, you're seeing a cutscene. But I think it's just like a super cool run that a lot of casual people are still playing the game, and so it's like fairly high on Twitch right now, but not a lot of speedrunners have picked it up yet, and I think it'd be really cool to see more people run it because I'm loving it.
Open world games are always really cool to see routed.
Yeah, that was the big thing too, is like routing for this game. I don't think it's even close to done because we've got like a pretty solid route now. I was doing some routing initially. Bubbles Del Fuego was doing some routing initially. Dutch Potato. There are several other people who have been doing Saigo. I think a lot of people have been doing routing and glitch hunting and stuff like that. We already have an out of bounds trick in the run, and I don't think we've merged all of those routes yet. Really, all of the stuff that different people have found. I think a lot of people have kind of just been optimizing their own thing, and we're now just starting to merge some of that stuff. And so I'm really excited to see where that goes because it's going to just continue to shoot down lower and lower. There's also DLC category because the first DLC got released for that, and it's much shorter. So I think it's a very fun and good game to like be a first speedrunning game if you need one, as long as you're okay with something a little on the longer side. And if you're not, then you play the DLC. So in other words, I'm just saying, Frozen, Darkman, you guys need to get a PS4. You need to pick up the game and start speedrunning it, so we can do some live races on GDQ Hotfix. This guy.
You really considered it. You could tell.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely.
Frozen might have considered it maybe a second longer than I did.
Yeah, and then I realized I just picked up a Switch, so.
Oh, there you go. All productivity out the window.
Yeah.
All right, Frozen. What's been on your mind lately? What's been cool for you?
So the big speedrunning thing, I guess, and not even so much, but with Fallout 76, the beta came out, and I'm sure that everybody had seen it in the news that the move speed in Fallout 76 was tied to the frame rate. So by looking down, you just accelerated nearby infinitely. And the fact that that's already discovered in a beta, that's great. I hope that I hope they keep that in, and I hope that even more things are found, because Bethesda games as a whole are some of my favorite runs, because Skyrim being able to zip through walls using a bowl. I mean, come on, you can't. It's just great.
Oh man!
For those who haven't seen some of the Elder Scrolls speedruns, they're they're a very interesting watch, I would say. There's
Yeah,
a lot
you
of-
know how many glitches you find in a casual playthrough? Imagine when you're trying to find glitches.
Yeah, it's I'm not gonna badmouth the dev because I'm sure it takes a lot of effort to make a game, far more than I can imagine. It's just like when I think about this, like tying like your movement, tying the frame rate to your movement speed. I'm just like is that like an intentional design? Was that an accident? Because like if it's an intentional design, like was that a thing that people stopped doing like 30 years ago? Like
No,
that,
Nope.
recent games definitely have it. There's well, the way that a lot of games do it is they'll lock your frame rate, right? Like they'll tie everything to the frame rate, but then they'll try to lock it at, or at least have a cap at 60 or 144 or whatever.
Yeah.
And I guess especially in a beta, it's just not capped. And so for people who don't know, like it's not that the game is normally running really slowly or anything. The clips I saw, the person was getting like 140 FPS when they were just playing the game normally. But when you're looking at the ground and suddenly the game doesn't need to load, like it doesn't need to show everything else that's going on, your FPS skyrockets to 300 because it can just handle it now, and thus you can move super fast.
Yeah.
I can't believe the speedruns will be forced themselves to play on the lowest graphical settings possible. We'll play on like an 800 by 600, resolution, so that way
It's going to be the graphics of GoldenEye again.
I was gonna say
That's
it's
what
gonna
it
be
is,
the best combination of Superman 64 and GoldenEye for speedrunning.
how is that
marriage?
Why don't you put
that
that
sentence?
in that sentence?
I don't want that sentence to come back ever again.
It's the truest marriage between like the two best speedrunning games of all time, GoldenEye and Superman 64.
I guess that's one way of looking at it.
Yeah, should be good. Well, we'll see. I mean, I fully expect that they'll fix that kind of thing, because I could see that if the game has any kind of like multiplayer or something, or if they plan to potentially have anything like that, that would very obviously become a very big issue. So I could see them fixing that while it's still in beta. Last little bit of checking in here, I think, is we want to every now and then talk about upcoming marathons too, not just GDQ ones, but other marathons that are going on as well, because they're super interesting. Like there's always a lot of marathons going on, similar to tournaments, not quite at the same level, but there's a lot of charity marathons going on all the time. And there is one that's starting up pretty soon. It's starting up on November 9th, running to the 11th, called Blast the Process 2. At twitch.tv/blast the process. And the thing I think that's cool about this is it's such a weird hodgepodge of games, not a lot of which are very good, which is always makes for a fun speedrunning marathon. They have their own bad games block inside a group of games that already have a lot of not great ones in it. There's the 3 run in a row Mikuyama block that I think is super funny.
Mikuyama always runs some bad games.
Oh yeah, we get to watch him run Captain Planet, Ernest Evans, and then Subterranea, so that ought to be pretty good. There's like a Marvel block in there, a Toon block, a Sonic block that's split up over 2 days because there's that many Sonic games in this thing. There's even a car block in this marathon. Okay.
I mean, listen, you need your vehicle games in this. Listen,
right?
It has Crazy Taxi. Like what? That's all you need, really. Like this is that game alone makes this marathon a success.
I like how Super Monkey Ball and Super Monkey Ball 2 are considered part of the car block for this, because they're
vehicle.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly.
Can't argue.
And also Calithon. Calithon submissions are currently going on, I think, for another week or so, maybe. So check that out. It's one of the bigger marathons that's going on that isn't a GDQ. And people always say that it's a lot of fun to go to. I had a blast when I went there 2 years ago, and I want to go again this year.
Yeah, and Darkman and I were both there last year too.
Yep.
So that was super fun.
Going on until the 20th, apparently.
Wow, Frozen. Gotta say the right thing.
2 weeks.
Getting corrected by Calithon's staff.
That's awful.
Yeah, no, I agree. Calithon's a wonderful event. It's pretty cool to see like a California marathon kind of growing and standing. Obviously there's there's a couple people in California that like games, and probably a couple people that like speedruns that live in the California area. So definitely, if you're interested in submitting, maybe attending, submit a game. Who knows? It might get in. I know some of the staff have a penchant for accepting some, meme games. So, if that's your cup of tea, maybe you should submit a meme game.
Oh, I'm submitting a humongous entertainment block.
Of course, a block. You're not even submitting just one game. You're like,
no, come on, that's 45 seconds. That's a block of them.
Oh boy, just run the entire library. It'll take you 4 minutes. Like
so the entire library. If I got good at it, my PV in it is like 45 minutes to get 16 games done.
I like how I was memeing and you knew. You were like immediately just straight there. All right,
all humongous entertainment. I mean, that's what I'm going to be submitting. So
this is a category you don't understand.
Now the real question is there more time spent on the gameplay or more time spent switching the game?
Yeah, switching between.
It's actually so. Humongous entertainment games have their own emulator, Scum VM.
Oh my god!
You just
of course
you switch within the game. It's great.
Wow.
Of course it does. Oh man. Well, to talk a little bit more about marathons, because we're going to get into our big world record analysis segment shortly, but to just kind of dive into that a little bit, because this is the first episode and everything. How do you guys feel about like the just plethora of marathons that are out there? Do you generally, especially since I think a lot of us have been on the organizational side as well as participating side, do you kind of like a lot of marathons being in the online format? Do you like seeing a lot more local ones cropping up? A good mix of both? Like, what do you guys think about that?
I mean, I think online marathons, both online and live marathons have their fair share of difficulties in order to just run it. You need a lot of help. You need a lot of people that are willing to kind of take action. But just like live, even more is even more of a beast because of just, the fact that it's a live venue. You have to coordinate with like hotels, make sure that people can get to your venue, find a venue, which is not very easy, let me tell you. Just all those sorts of things. Like you just don't know if like enough people are going to show up and all that. So yeah, it's like I would love to see more live marathons. I think live marathons are fantastic. It's just great to kind of like, people see like GDQs and what happens there. Obviously you see the thousands of people at this event, you see hundreds of people watching at any given time. But like the live marathons of other speedrunning marathons are a bit different than GDQs. They're a lot more intimate. Like I think Calathon had maybe like 70 to 100 people. I don't know. Could be, really wrong on that one. But, it's a much more intimate feel. Like everybody's kind of friends with everybody. It's not really that like whole like people kind of go to their own like cliques, for lack of a better term. Not that that's a bad thing, but just like when you have like 2,000 people at an event,
it's a habit to go to what you're comfortable with. And in a smaller event, you hang around everybody because that's the size of your normal clique.
Right. Yeah, you go to dinner and it's like, oh, the entire marathon is here right now. What do you guys like? I know there have been a few too that have been like experimenting with not being in a 24-hour format, because not only is that like it's harder to find a venue that's willing to allow you to be there for 24 hours, but also it's harder to produce, right? If you're going to have zero downtime, you don't have a break time to fix tech issues really, other than what you can spare during the event.
Right.
Stuff like that. Do you guys think like everything has to be 24-hour marathons, or is there a good like place, kind of a niche to fit in with having them split across multiple days?
So from an attendee, sometimes volunteer aspect, I think that marathons being half of the day and ending at night is fantastic. It allows the staff and the volunteers to be able to take their downtime and actually get to experience the rest of the event. Hang out with their friends, make it so that it's not just 24-hour work. So, yeah,
that's true. I'm like, I don't think we've like hit a saturation point or anything of like more marathons are just taking away from other marathons or anything like that. So right now, I think we're still in a ramp up of like, I would love to see more, but I wonder if we'll ever hit that kind of where it's like, all right, suddenly every single weekend has a marathon on it. And now it's like, well, people are super generous, but they can only donate so much, right? Like, is that,
yeah.
I wonder if we'll ever kind of have that point, like if we ever hit that.
I mean, it's certainly possible. Like, I think of some, other scenes that are not speedrunning scene, people definitely have that like vibe to it that like, hey, we have like an event almost every weekend. You can only go to so many events. But right now we're not there. Like we have what, maybe like 6, 7, 8 live events, something like that, you know, in the community, you know, that are like open to like the public. Obviously, there's some, you know, live events that like people invite other people, but yeah, I would definitely like to see more live events because, you know, we can obviously support them, but yeah, they're just hard. And kind of like going back with your previous question about like the whole like the, you know, making them a 24-hour or 12-hour or like, you know, something like that. Yeah, I'm actually, you know, as an organizer who's not only A, worked, you know, on GDQs, and B, worked on other smaller events, honestly think that 24-hour marathon isn't really something that like most marathons have to do. If you have the resources to do it, by all means, but don't stress yourself trying to do it. Like GDQ benefits not only from like having an actual like staff that's like on site and like we can kind of rotate through schedules and whatnot, but like a big staff, I should say, relatively speaking. But we also have like hundreds of volunteers that also help us as well. So like we have that benefit that like other, you know, smaller marathons don't. So like you know, if you don't think you can stomach, or if you can't like find the resources to like get 24 or to get a 24-hour like event going, don't do it. Like you really don't need to. There's always that, you know, great continuity, you know, of having like a 24-hour event, but you certainly never have to do that if you don't feel like you can do it.
Yeah. Well, I like I said, I don't think we're anywhere near a point to where like we've seen all the marathons we're going to see, or like it more just going to kind of hurt others. So I think that we'll continue to see more people experiment with formats and stuff like that. And I think that's always really good to see. Just more variety out there is only going to help expand the scene to everybody. And we would love to have more people interested in speedrunning. It's kind of why we're doing the show, right? Like it's one of the reasons at least. Well, I think then we're actually having a couple of technical difficulties with our guest analyst, our like expert analyst. So we're probably going to go to a quick break here, see if we can get those ironed out. And we'll be coming back with either our world record segment, because we're going to be talking about Celeste today, the Celeste 90% world record, or we'll be moving to another segment while we give their internet a little bit more time to kind of sort itself out. So in the meantime, enjoy the trailer for Celeste for anybody who is not familiar with the game. Yeah. No. Darkman, can you type in chat technical difficulties? All right. Sorry about that, everybody. Welcome back. Thanks for bearing with us. Some last-minute technical issues happened with Moose's internet, unfortunately, who was going to be our expert analyst for Celeste here. But luckily, TGH was able to help us out and show up on very short notice to talk about his own run. So welcome, TGH. How are you doing?
Yo, what's up, guys?
Yeah, thank you again for filling in late.
Yeah, so it's really cool to have you on. One of the things that we want to do with the show, kind of our big segment that we want to do every episode, is we want to take a world record or a PB. Like Darkman talked about this a little bit at the beginning of the show, but we'll take a world record or notable PB and break it down for you guys, because a lot of casual audiences tend to think that like world record is unbeatable. Right, world record is always the thing, and there's no way it's going to be beaten, and yet every world record ends up getting beaten sooner or later. So we want to kind of like break those down and show what are the points in this run that are not going to be beaten, at least not anytime soon. What is if somebody were to be trying to compete with world record, what are they going to have a hard time beating, and what are the spots where there actually is a bit of room for improvement, and some where they really need to capitalize on those chances for time save if they want to take that record. So we're going to be talking about Celeste today. I'm going to go ahead and just play part of your run here, Tej. If you could kind of give us a little bit of the story behind your current record, I guess, like who's held it in the past, how you came to the game, that kind of thing.
Oh boy. Okay. Let's see. Well, I think I first took the record back when it was a 35. I want to say my first one was 35:32, and at that point I took it from Cosmic Sense. I think since then it's gone down marginally, and now it's at 29:21. So it's like since then it's gone down over 6 minutes, which is incredible. Like even for a new game, like you know, despite the fact that this is a mostly glitchless run, pretty much like we've just lowered the time that much just by like A, getting better at the game, and B, like finding actual like speed tech, you know, that aren't glitches. Which I mean even for a new game, I don't think you really find that much with games that aren't that glitchy. So that's really cool. Since I took it from Cosmic Sense, though, I've had like world record battles with YP Yoshi Pro 101, who I raced with at SGDQ this past SGDQ, and I think we battled like down to like 32, I want to say, and then I think it was me up until like 29, and then the most recent one who's had it except for me was Flatterby, who's actually in the chat, I believe. Shout outs to Flad. He took it in a race against me in a race in the tournament that's going on right now. So that was pretty interesting.
Did he pick up the game because of it? I think that Moose was telling us that he picked up the game from the tournament itself. Like,
I think a lot of people did. Yeah, like the tournament has really done a great job to like get the game out there. You know, even more than it had been. You know, it's a pretty popular indie game for sure, but this tournament has done really well to sort of push it towards the speedrunning scene, and help that even more as well. So,
and then you ended up taking it back from Flad, obviously. Just what, like the next day or a few days later or something like that?
Yeah, he kind of kicked me in the pants a little bit. I definitely had a spark lit under me from that loss in that race, and I you know, I was pretty inspired to take it back that night, and I think since then it's improved by actually the run that this run right now you're seeing is comparing to was the run that took it, and now I'm comparing it to that run, and this was the 29:21. That city was awful, by the way. That was a bad city.
We'll give you plenty of crap about that. But also, just like we mentioned it a little bit before, that the Celeste tournament was going on, and you actually had 2 matches today. And if I'm not mistaken, in those 2 runs that you had today against Oddbud, you had one that was 6 seconds off of a new world record, and one that was 1 second off of a record, right?
I think though, yeah, I think those 2 races, I don't think I've ever played Celeste better than I did those races.
Wow.
I think I mentioned that in the post-game interview, but yeah, it just goes to show that, like, you know, like I made some costly mistakes that cost me the record like near the end, like in those races, but still I don't think I've ever played better than that, like overall. It just goes to show though, like how beatable this run actually is. It's definitely not perfect, as you've probably seen already. There were quite a few movement mistakes in City, the first level in the game. But yeah, it's you know, I'm looking pretty soon to like get something like closer to 29:10-ish, maybe 29, like lower 2019s would be nice for sure.
Well, cool.
If you don't mind, I just want to briefly touch upon this. Like, you know, for those, like, obviously Celeste is a very popular indie game, but like for those who aren't aware of Celeste, like what is it about this game that, like, you know, makes it a really good speed game? Like, you know, is it like the movement? Is it just like, you know, the whole like aspect of the game? Like, what is it that you think is really great about this game as a speed game?
The movement feels incredible, and you can just go super fast. Like that's what I like about it. Like it's a game that mixes really well, like fluidity of movement and the sort of aspect that I like about most speed games that I play. That's just like a casual player can look at it and go like, wow, you know, like I had no idea you could do stuff like that. That's super cool. Like for instance, the hyper dash in this game, the sort of propelling jump, rocketing forward that you see me doing constantly, along with other things. You just like, and casual players who don't play like, you know, the super harder levels, like there's a level in game that teaches you how to do that, but like most players don't really make it that far, and you have to get like every collectible in the game in order to like reach that point. So those who don't see that or find that, see this and think like, whoa, like what have I been missing? Like what is going on here? So I like that aspect of speed games for sure.
Cool.
Well, cool. Let's just kind of dive into it here. I've got a bunch of clips that I prepared from talking with Moose. And again, like, thank you so much to Moose for helping us prepare this. Like, we would not have all the information and all the like clips that we do have without him. And thank you, TJH, for filling in and talking to us about him. But the first one I want to jump into is in City here. And Moose was telling us a little bit about some of the mistakes in this room. It's just going to kind of go on loop here. Yeah, and
goes into that.
Yeah, absolutely. So why don't we start with if you could kind of explain from the like beginning of this room the movement tech that's going on here and kind of how that works, and that'll give us a pretty good basis for the game as a whole. And we could talk more about kind of where there's spots for improvement and stuff.
I think what happened there was I don't even know what I did there. Why I didn't make it onto the ledge. I guess I just didn't jump high enough. What I do is there's this tech in the game called I call it wall bouncing, but I think the proper term for it is a vertical hyper, where you dash up alongside a wall and kick off of it, and you gain right there. See that? Like you gain vertical speed, and like basically just jump up off the wall like that. For whatever reason, I just like didn't quite get the height on the jump after that, or it looks like I really didn't even jump at all. Actually, that was weird. So I must have just missed the input or something. And didn't make it up on that ledge. Well, the strat is to actually jump from this wall right here and make it up on the ledge, and then do that reverse hyper dash right there and go over. But for whatever reason, I just didn't make it up there, and that cost maybe, I don't know, half a second, like to a second, somewhere between that range.
You're mentioning reverse hyper dash a couple times. Why don't you break that down piece by piece for us? Because obviously there must be a hyper dash, which you mentioned before. How does that work?
So you have a hyper dash. Well, it's actually the third one I'm going to mention here. There's the hyper dash, where you essentially just you hold, you crouch, you jump, and you dash all at the same time, and it gets you this really like fast horizontal movement, but you don't get your dash back. There's an extended hyper dash to follow up on that, where you actually delay the inputs so that you jump in between the refresh period of your dash, which is 10 frames, and the period where you can no longer like actually get the momentum from the jump for the hyper dash, which is 15 frames. So it's a 5-frame window, and if you jump within that frame, you actually get your dash back. A reverse hyper dash, you can actually dash one way and then jump the other way to have the same effect, except it's useful in parts like this where there's not enough ground. You can see that ledge where there's like not enough ground to actually like get your dash back on that ground. So we reverse. And what that does is that allows us to actually reach that refresh period before we jump. And that gets us our dash back so we can dash over those spikes.
And for those, again, not familiar with the term frames, so there's, we talk about the game and the frame rate and how it runs. So Celeste runs at 60 frames per second. So when TGH says it's a five-frame window, he's talking about you have 5 frames out of the 60. So you have basically a 1/12 of a second in order to pull it off. It seems really daunting and like crazy. Like, how could you pull it off in a 1/12 of a second? It's not as hard as you think it is, but still a very challenging thing to pull off.
Yeah. The complexity comes from making sure that you can do it 100% of the time.
Yeah.
Right. As opposed to, anybody can go in and try it a bunch and pull it off a couple times.
Yeah, and it becomes muscle memory. It's just, and any speedrunner knows, like something that's a 5-frame trick can basically be done every time if you just practice it enough, and you just get it down to muscle memory.
So one of the other things that Moose was telling us about this room here is that not only was there obviously the slight flub with getting up onto the ledge, but there's a strat here that not many people have gone for because it's kind of seen as TAS only at the moment, and that is to like do a corner boost off the spikes, right? Can you explain what corner boosting is, and then kind of maybe why that strat hasn't been implemented yet?
Sure. So corner boosts are hard, especially when you're doing it off of a wall with spikes on it, like that one is, and that's why we don't do that. But corner boost is basically what a corner boost is. It was introduced in a patch that fixed a bug involving like accidentally kicking off of walls. So, and what it is if you're holding grab and you launch yourself at a wall, you can actually, like, if you hit the top 3 pixels of the wall, you have a 3-frame window to jump while holding grab and actually just launch yourself like along the wall. Like it's kind of weird to describe, but you can dash into this little thing that I'm dashing over there right now. You can dash into that and corner boost off of that, but it's really tight because of the spikes on top of it. And if you miss it by a little bit, you're dead. So
How much time did you say that would save you if you did do that?
probably half a second.
So we're talking about a room, you know, like this is a run that Flatterby took your record recently, but other than that, I mean, you've kind of been the one improving it, like over and over for I think several months uncontested, right? Or at least several weeks. And we're talking about one room here. That's kind of why we do this segment.
Mhm.
Like this one room alone probably has what, a second and a half, 2 seconds of potential time save if somebody were to really grind it hard and just, you know, be able to nail that one section.
Yeah, I would say. But the thing is, though, in an any percent run, which is like, 30 minutes, you have, I want to say, is it like 700 rooms
Wow.
that are like this? So like, yeah, and like getting them all like perfectly is just like that's the struggle that we're trying to that we're dealing with here. So this room, I probably lost more time in this room alone than I did in like every other room in the game. This is probably the biggest like single time loss, like even deaths, because my deaths weren't even this costly, I think, in the run. So I think I had 3 deaths like that were unintentional. But yeah, this was definitely a little bit of a blunder movement for sure.
Well,
Picked
that's
a good
fine.
one.
One of the reasons why we picked this one was because we thought it was a good room to explain all of that basic tech that you talked about, and also explain corner boosting. Because I'm going to go into the next clip here, still in City here. And this was another thing that Moose wanted to highlight, is that there's a lot of really advanced, you know, effectively TAS-only strats at the moment that nobody goes for, but he thinks eventually, you know, everyone will have to go for it. So you were talking about how like there's spikes everywhere here, right? And then that if you lose one of those, you lose multiple seconds. How soon do you think it'll be before people start going for some of the crazy strats, like doing a corner boost off of spikes in this room, say?
Well, I always say I actually had an interesting discussion with somebody about this last night. So it's funny that you mentioned stuff like this. The more aggressive strat in this room saves 0.3 seconds.
Mhm.
So like you're talking about like, the run getting to the point where 0.3 seconds cannot be saved anywhere else, which is a little bit unrealistic at the moment. I don't know how advanced it's going to get like in the future. Honestly, it's like it's not really easy to tell right now, but I guess it could get to that point where like 0.3 seconds literally cannot be saved anywhere else in the run. But this is such a movement intensive run where like the littlest things can save you like a surprisingly large amount of time, like relative to what that saves you. Like just for instance, like jumping up from a wall onto a ledge that you're climbing up to, like even the littlest bit of like airtime that you have there that can lose you like 0.2 seconds, you can save it there instead of saving it here, and like, so to assume that this will matter a lot in the future is to assume that everyone will have literally perfect movement.
Right.
And
Well,
it's just it's not realistic to really consider right now. Again, it could be in the future, once we get better at the game, but it's scary to think about for sure.
right. And part of it too comes from consistency, right? Because I think from a lot of the people we talk to, you're kind of known as like the consistent runner with Celeste, and that's kind of why your records have been so hard to take recently. And I think I've talked with you about this before, and you kind of said that if you think a run is or a strat is consistent enough, it doesn't matter how risky it is to you, right? Or like to a certain degree.
Yeah, for sure.
And so that's kind of where, that's why we're highlighting something that's maybe only 0.3 seconds of potential time save, is because like, well, maybe the next person who shows up, that's consistent enough to them, right? And then those things end up stacking over the course of the run.
Yeah, that's part of it as well. And I feel like since I started running, like I've incorporated a lot more of those strats and made them consistent as well. So you're definitely that's definitely the right track.
Yeah, I was gonna say
Yeah,
you've definitely brought a lot of those strats that people would have been saying the same thing about before.
Yeah.
they're not consistent enough. And
yeah, so who am I to say that we won't be doing that consistently in the future? But it needs to be consistent as a thing.
Right. Well, I'll go ahead and jump into our next one here. Sorry, the file name's on the screen there, by the way, guys. That's something I'll fix for next time.
We did say it was a beta test.
Yeah, exactly. So we're jumping into chapter 2 here, which overall was pretty good from what we understand. Except again, Moose wanted to talk about more of those spots where new strats from borrowing from the TASs or borrowing from IL runs could potentially start coming in. This is a section that like is very obviously fast, right?
Yeah.
But for anybody who caught the TASs at SGDQ, they know that it can be even like crazy faster.
Yeah, there's like we're talking setting TASs aside for this particular section, because the TASs is absolutely like beyond ridiculous at this point when it comes to what humans are capable of. I would say this part of the run, like I could probably save like about maybe a little bit more than a second on this movement. Like even though like this movement is really clean for what I do, like this, let's see, this particular room right here, I can do what's called an ultra dash. I'll explain that in a minute. That's an ultra dash there. This is as well. You can see I'm getting a little bit faster movement from a down diagonal dash.
Okay.
Just because of a property of movement that down diagonal dashes have, and that they chain momentum rather than killing it like every other directional dash does, which is really strange, and we're not sure why it happens, but it happens, and it's fast, so we use it. But yeah, so I think and also in what, like the third to last screen, I think there's a strat that's probably 0.2 0.3 faster. But yeah, I mean it goes to show that, like, you know, not every screen is completely optimal in any percent, but like I base my strats off of what's consistent for me. And it's worked so far, so, and I'm probably not going to stop doing it until until it gets seriously challenged, and it will be soon, but for now this is good.
So, you know, obviously there's always time to be saved, you know, there could be faster strats, but like, let's not, you know, sell this short. Like, I'm just looking at, like, you know, you graciously have a controller, you know, cam there, or control cam, excuse me, a controller, you know, input screen there, so people can kind of see what's going on. I'm looking at all these buttons, it's like, this makes like no sense to me. It's just like pressing a bunch of buttons and it's like working. So like, how difficult exactly is it to just do what you do, let alone, you know, doing even better?
It's black magic. It's no, I'm kidding. It's
that explains a lot.
It's well, it's definitely, it's one of those things that, you know, you take a complex series of inputs and you simplify it. You know, you just like mentally simplify it. So for instance, like hyper dashes like come across as two inputs on the controller display, but you know, you think of that as one input when you get used to it and you like memorize what, and you basically like push that back to your subconscious. You have that as muscle memory. So that's probably part of the reason why it looks so crazy on the input display, is just because of that. Just because it's like, you know, it's a lot simpler than it looks by looking at that, like when you're running the game.
Well, we'll jump into the next one here. I meant to make a note of this at the beginning, that from your own admission and from like what we've looked at, a lot of the kind of mistakes of the run are more front loaded, and a lot of the reason that this has not been beaten, and like you're even coming really close but haven't quite beaten it yet, is because of the end of the run is so amazing. So like I said, we want to highlight both spots where there's room for improvement, but also spots where things are effectively unbeatable. And so some of that is coming, don't worry. It's just there's a lot more of the mistakes front loaded. And with that, we're going to see your first death here. One of I think only 3 unintentional deaths.
I don't even remember where the first death was.
Well, here it is in chapter 3. And
yes. No, that was tactical, actually. That was RNG manip.
Okay, gotcha.
I dove straight into that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Basically, I just inputted slightly early for a dash there. You can see on the controller display the circle is my dash button, and I press circle. I try to do it as soon as possible on the transition, but for whatever reason, I must have done it too early. Although it didn't really. Well, actually, looking at it now, it didn't look like I did it too early. That's weird. Anyway, yo, Matt, fix that, dude. Shoutouts to Matt Thorson. But yeah, and this death was maybe 2 seconds max.
Yeah, it's like effectively just the cost of the animation almost.
Yeah, and the animation's about a second and a half.
You were barely even on the screen.
Yeah, so death's minimum costs about a second and a half because of the animation, and I was about half a second to the death, so it was probably about 2 seconds.
Yeah, and when we like, this wasn't one that we were going to worry about talking about a lot, but just to show like, hey, even in world record, deaths happen.
Yeah.
Like no runner is perfect. There's always going to be, hiccups here and there. But we'll move into the next one. Now here, you make what looks like a really impossibly tight cycle, but from what we understand in this room, there's actually an even tighter one, right? That could be potentially made in the future.
Yeah, so that's like the second fastest cycle. The cycle that is most optimal is actually you go under that last dust bunny that's going up and down. And to do that, you need to actually do a wall bounce off of the inner wall. Like you can see I jump off that little platform that's like near the ground, and then dash up. The more optimal strat is to actually wall bounce off the inner wall, land, and then that gets you up there fast enough to do a hyper dash and then slide down and dash down. And that's probably, I don't know, maybe a little bit faster than half a second faster.
Yeah, and so like we're talking about, it's those small things, but if someone were to start implementing these things, that's where it adds up over the course of a run.
Yeah.
So far, we haven't heard a single thing that was more than a 2 second gain or loss, and overall probably like 15 seconds.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the thing with this run is it's like, I think this is a premium example of like a choice strat. Like you have a choice of what to do in this room. Like you could even like go an even slower cycle in this room, and that'll probably cost you another half second. But that's the great thing about these runs is you can pick and choose. Like you don't have to do like every super optimal strat in order to compete, I think. And and this is just proof of it, I think.
One of the other,
it's more about the general movement than the strats, in my opinion. But that's just the way I think about runs.
Right. And one of the other reasons why we grabbed this clip is to kind of show for people, since chapter 3 is all about cycles. There aren't a lot of the other chapters that have a ton of cycle stuff around them, but chapter 3 is like super cycle based. And whenever looking at how to optimize or improve sections of any speedrun that involves cycles, there's always the question of, all right, this is currently the fastest thing that is done. Can I beat one more cycle or one more half cycle or whatever? In this case, can I get under that last dust bunny instead of going over him? And that's just something that you can always look at in like pretty much any run that involves cycles.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about this game too is, I don't know if we've touched upon this at all, but every cycle in the game that you see, like in chapter 3 or otherwise, is screen based. It's not global. It's not a global cycle. So it's from when you enter the screen is when the cycle starts. And it's different when you die as well. Like the cycles are different on deaths as opposed to on entering screens. So
you hope that the deaths happen in rooms without cycles. Got it. So you have to prepare for both.
Some death cycles are much easier than entrance cycles, though. So it's, I guess.
So you could actually do RNG manip too.
Oh yeah, definite RNG manip.
Right. All right. Yeah. Well, we'll move on. Here's where we get to highlight something that was just a crazy strat, and I would love, I want to hear your perspective, but I'll actually go ahead and give the background on this one first to a small degree.
This one.
Yeah. So in this room here, Tej actually skips the cutscene at the beginning, and that puts him in a new spot, and then you see that he actually dashes through this wall, and that alone is already super impressive that you can do this, and we'll get into why. But on top of that, you aren't given a checkpoint, right? So if you died to that wall, how far back would you go?
It's about an 8-second loss if you die to that. And this is a pixel perfect dash. The safer play is to actually transition down to the next screen and then come back up, and that makes it so that if you die, you just spawn right there. But I don't do that because I want to try to save the 2 seconds. So I'm basically, I think more people will start doing this soon, but I think as of right now, I might be the only person in any percent doing this with no checkpoint.
And I think that kind of highlights the going back to the consistency thing, where if you think something is consistent, you'll do it, even if it's super risky, like a pixel perfect trick.
Yeah, and even though this is pixel perfect, it definitely is a lot more consistent than it probably looks just from a glance. But I'll tell you what's happening here. So basically, this wall of dust bunnies that you see, and also every similar wall of like either dust bunnies or spikes that you see in the game, are made up of these little round ball-shaped hitboxes that are 4 pixels apart exactly. And it was found recently by Demo Jameson, hence the name of the trick called Demo Dash. That if you dash, basically it's weird how the game like reads which direction you're dashing, because you have to hold the direction while you're dashing. But if you don't hold the direction and you press down and dash at the same time and let go of down, you will dash with a crouching hitbox, which is exactly 4 pixels tall. So you can see on the controller display as well. I think I hit down and left before pressing left when I dash. That's to get the crouching hitbox during the dash, and that's what allows this trick to be possible.
Cool. So we were talking about, before there were mistakes, it's, like a half a second, potential learn a new strat, and you save a third of a second, lost a second and a half from a death. And here you're doing something that has the potential to lose you up to 8 seconds, and not going for the checkpoint to mitigate that time loss for such a like precise strat, because it'll save you 2 seconds. This is why we want to highlight the the bad and the good, because this is the kind of thing that's like you would have to do 4 of those other half-second optimizations to make up for this one single thing that you do.
Yeah.
And that's what's really cool about the record. And it's one of those segments that, like, all right, somebody going into this specific section, they're probably not going to beat this unless suddenly there's a faster setup or something. But even then, they'd have to be very risky to go for it.
And one thing to kind of highlight, when TJ just talking about pixels, we're talking about these small little parts on the screen, very, very tiny. Like when he says pixel perfect, he means literally you're on that tiny little area that's right, or you're just wrong and you're dead. So TJ, how do you, like, if this is a pixel perfect trick, you're just going for it. Like, how do you know, like, how do you get consistent at something that, like, requires such a tiny window?
It's just feel and practice. Like I think you can see me like set up a long time on this wall. That's so that I'm making sure I'm on a certain pixel on the wall before I go ahead and execute this. And from there, it's just timing and muscle memory. And like, I have a little bit of a visual cue too. I dash as soon as Madeline starts to fall. By the way, the main character in the game is called Madeline. I'm not sure if that was touched on.
We've got her over your webcam now down here. So.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Much better than me being there. That's but yeah, it's just practicing it and like getting consistent at it. And if I get consistent at something, I go all in on that. So I'm able to rely on it most of the time.
Cool. Well, we'll move on to the next one here. This one's in chapter 4, and we grabbed this one because it's kind of pretty easy to conceive here what could, like, why what the like faster strat could be faster. And that is, here you're on this auto scrolling block here. You can't speed up the way the block moves, and you kind of have to wait on it for a while there. Can you explain like why you need this block, and then kind of what the potential faster strat would be if somebody were to be crazy enough to learn it to not even use the block?
Yeah, so you don't need this block. Fun fact, you don't need the block to complete the autoscroller, but completing the autoscroller is very inconsistent for pretty much everybody. So I don't go for it. I just do this, and this loses, I think, 3 to 3.5 seconds over doing the autoscroller skip like in full. But yeah, the autoscroller skip itself involves a grounded ultra dash, which is basically just like you do back-to-back really quick extended hyper dashes on the ground, and that extends your jump just barely far enough so that you can make it to the edge and corner jump off the inside. And corner jumps are pretty precise in themselves as well, so you need to. There's just a lot of variables to the trick, which is why most people decide to do this. This is the more aggressive of the safe strats that we do in this room. There are actually like 3 different ways to use this block to get across, to not actually ride the block all the way there. This is the fastest of them, which involves an ultra dash off of the block, and you can see that I'm extended hyper dashing off of the block and then immediately dashing down, and hopping and bunny hopping, which conserves the momentum, which gets you all the way across. And I missed the wall bounce at the end, but honestly, that's like not something I like to go for in full runs, just because it's risky and you hit your head, you die. So it's like whatever. But you can also just extended hyper dash from in front of the block, using the block's momentum to push you that much faster forward. And you can also do that same thing, except hyper dashing and bunny hopping from in front of the block, and that gives you even more momentum. But this is the faster of the three.
So it's cool to see that, like, despite the fact that it's known that you don't need this block to do it and it is faster to do it that way, there's still optimizations made to using the block, because right now, like you said, that's too risky. It's inconsistent. So people don't like to go for it.
Yeah.
And yet there's always that feeling. I mean, I've had it with other games. I'm sure you guys have it with this, where once you know something like that exists, eventually someone's going to be going for it, right? Like, and they will get that time save. So, you know, it's kind of cool to like see it and think of it like, hey, eventually this will be in the run, and that'll be neat.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. We're going to move into our next one here. Chapter 4 again. So this is kind of just where we get to give you praise and gush at the glorious movement here, because this room in particular, we talked about there aren't a ton of cycle things after chapter 3, but these snowballs that appear are on a cycle, and they're based on your position when they enter the screen. And the movement you do here in order to not get hit by this second snowball is absolutely insane.
Yeah.
Can you explain a little bit about what's going on?
Okay, so yeah, there's a lot going on the screen. First off, this is a screen with heavy wind blowing against you. And one important thing to note is that if you're dashing or have dash momentum, the wind doesn't actually affect what you're doing. So you can hyper through the wind all day and it won't affect what you're doing. So yeah, we have to keep taking advantage of that fact in order to not get screwed by the snowball here. And it does involve pretty quick movement. Like, you know, you have to pretty much be moving as fast as you can all the way through. There's an ultra dash there, and then I just like kind of slide off of that platform and let myself fall just enough so that I can like horizontal dash to the next one, and then do a dash cancel off of that and jump up. And this is one of the more complicated rooms in Golden Ridge Chapter 4. But yeah, it works out. This is actually a variation of a strat that I saw Flatterby doing, which actually involves using coyote frames, if you know what those are. Coyote frames are basically like the game gives you a sort of grace period, walking off of a how do you describe it? Walking off of a cliff, yeah. Where like you won't fall, you'll have some time to jump still, even though you're falling technically. So he uses coyote frames to actually jump all the way up to the bubble from the platform that I slide up off of. But this is slightly slower, but it's much more consistent for me. So like this is the one that I do, and it's pretty consistent with practice.
Yeah, we wanted to show this one because it's like it's just so impressive to look at. And this is one of those segments that somebody would be very hard pressed to be able to actually beat. So we'll move into the next one here. We're going into chapter 5. Now we're back to the mistakes, back to giving you crap.
Chapter 5 was awful. Chapter 5 is my worst chapter.
Small language warning as well.
You might hear that a couple times.
Yeah, for anyone who cares. But basically, so why don't you explain kind of the skip here? Because it looks like basically what happened is you were trying to avoid having to land on this ledge in the second room in this clip entirely, but instead you had to.
So this strat is hard. Just getting this corner boost for one right there off of that ledge that you can't see what's in front of you, as well as jumping just barely high and low enough to not have this happen. Because what happened there was I just barely hit the floor, and that's what caused me to just like slide into the wall there.
So effectively that like redirected what would have been downwards diagonal momentum more horizontal so that you hit the wall.
Ideally, you skip the entire room here, basically. So like you go all the way down and then just dash up to the end and you are done with the room. That probably lost me like 3.5-4 seconds, that mistake right there.
And this is something that you do see other runners going for, right?
Yeah, pretty much every top runner goes for that, because there's really no sense in not going for it anymore, because you don't really lose any time over not doing it if you fail it. So
Mhm.
unless you die, which I didn't quite here. I almost did, but I didn't.
Yeah, and that's another thing that we picked this for, to highlight, like your ability to save yourself when you notice that a strat is going south is pretty widely used throughout the entire record, and is one of the reasons why you are where you are, which is cool.
Yeah, definitely.
Move on next. So here, anybody who caught the Celeste any percent race at SGDQ 2018, or yeah, 2018. I had to remember what year it was for a second. Saw you go for a different strat in this room, one that's actually faster than what you do here. Can you explain kind of what that is and why you don't go for it anymore?
Yeah, so anybody who watched that SGDQ run knows already that I am extremely inconsistent at that strat. I failed it like 15 times. But it's a strat that saves about a second and a half. You can actually dash from the ledge below the first bubble, and you can extended hyper dash, and it's an extremely extended hyper dash, like as much as you can, into a corner boost off of the first sort of block there with spikes on it, which allows you to dash up and right into the bubble, and it's extremely difficult. But it only saves like a second and a half to 2 seconds if you do it perfectly. So I don't go for it and choose to swallow my pride and not
Did
do
you
it.
stop after SGDQ?
Yeah.
No, actually, SGDQ was kind of an exception.
Wow.
Because I just decided I would go for some crazy strats at SGDQ, and that was one of them. I think the auto scroll skip in Golden Ridge was the other one that I tried once and then decided never again. So
Always good. All right, well, let's.
I just want to take a personal anecdote and say, like, I like the fact that the community calls it the double bubble skip, because like
Yeah.
in Mega Man 5, there's literally a trick with like pretty much the exact same name. So I
Really?
can really appreciate that.
it's better than the original name for the trick, which was Hamlet skip.
Ooh, the call-outs.
Because because and there's actually a funny story behind that. The creator of the founder of the trick called it Hamlet skip because they wanted to name it after double double boil and trouble, or whatever the line is, from what they thought was Hamlet, but it's actually from Macbeth. So so it was supposed to be called Macbeth skip, but they didn't.
That's great.
So yeah, but double bubble skip is a lot easier to understand for somebody new to it. So
well, we move from that spot where you decided not to go for that anymore, rather, into a section that it's about to loop around now, which is great because this is just one of the coolest sections of the run and incredibly difficult to optimize. As somebody who has dabbled in running this game, this was always the part that I knew would look the coolest and be the hardest, and so I was always scared of it. And I think you even say it right at the end of this entire section that basically you needed it to be that good.
Oh yeah, I needed this Theo section to be perfect to maintain like any lead I had.
So what's the complexity going on here, really? Why is this something that it's going to be so hard for anybody else to compare against?
Well, the thing that makes Theo hard, and one of the more technical parts of the run, is that you can't actually dash when you're carrying Theo. And that's the main thing. That's like the thing to keep in mind here. You can't actually dash while you're holding Theo. So you need to throw Theo and then either hyper dash or ultra like I did right there, and catch him and then bunny hop with him to maintain the momentum, which can be hard in some parts. There are some strats that require some pretty crazy ultra dashes that I do that maintain the momentum into like landing on a seeker. Like this right here is cool enough, but this one, that one's pretty cool too. And like all these rooms here, we just like use ultra momentum to bop the seekers. That's what those are called, by the way. They're called seekers or beholders or whatever you want. We have other names for them that I can't mention on air here. But, so yeah, it's just a really cool section, and I'll be sad the day that 5B becomes the norm for speedruns, because 5B, there's a bug in game that allows you to actually complete the level's B side and unlock the subsequent A side. So you can get the cassette tape, which unlocks the B side in 5B, then complete 5B and 6A will be unlocked.
But it's a much harder level, right?
Oh
on
yeah,
top of
it's
also being
harder. It's
optimized.
harder because it requires a ridiculously difficult corner boost to even like pretend you're saving time from doing 5B. So it's but for now 5A is much more consistent and will probably be the norm for most runners for a while.
Until then, we get sexy Theo strats. It's great.
Yep.
All right, let's move into chapter 6 now. And here we'll probably go through this one pretty quick, but wanted to briefly mention that you do something that not everybody goes for yet, which is that there's a bit of a fork in the road here, right?
Yeah, there's a top section and a bottom section, and actually it's fairly recently that I started going top instead of bottom. The top route saves somebody else timed it. I've never timed it, I'll be honest with you, but I know it's faster. It's about 0.3 seconds faster if you do the strats that I do there. There's a slightly faster strat you can do on the last bumper, but that's also a little bit inconsistent for me, so I don't go for it. So I just do that. But yeah, it's about 0.3 faster, but bumpers are evil, and you can potentially lose a lot of time in this room if you miss a bumper. Like, and you have to like position yourself really well on these bumpers in order to boost yourself in the correct direction with the right speed. So you can see on this second bumper here, I dash into it, and there's a trick with bumpers where if you're holding in the direction that you are meant to be boosting, you get like twice the distance in that direction. So I need to dash left into this bumper and then hold right immediately after dashing left, and that gets me far enough to get to the next bumper. So you need to do that to save time going top route.
It's cool. One of those small, strats that already starting to see people do. And by people, I mean mainly you.
small strats that are becoming bigger and bigger by the day, for sure.
All right, and now we move into the second unintentional death of the run. There's not a whole lot to say about this one, really.
So fun fact: if I were playing on anything else but the PC, the game would have crashed right there.
Oh,
so
really?
a more recent patch actually fixed the crash. But if you die in that cutscene right there, you crash the game and it just closes.
wow.
So
well, is it for those like that are not familiar with Celeste runs? Is it because you're like just going far ahead of where they expect you to be at that point in time?
Yes, you have so much momentum going into this room that like the game tries to slow you down, but it just can't. Like when you're entering that cutscene, so you just slide into the spikes, and it's pretty cool. But yeah, the game doesn't know how to handle that, or it didn't before it was patched. But the game just used to not be able to handle that, so it just crashed. But
and to be clear, there's a cutscene there, so like that's what he was trying to do there. I think you tried to skip it just a fraction too early or something.
Yeah, I'm sliding into a cutscene trigger essentially, and actually what it was is I just mismenued for the cutscene skip button, which is basically you open the menu, you press down, and then you press A or X or confirmation to skip the cutscene. It also happens to be the retry button as well. So if you do it when you're not in a cutscene, you self-destruct, which is not ideal either. So if I were to do that too early, I would have self-destructed and had to do the room over again, which is like a 4 or 5 second loss.
Yeah, that wouldn't be great.
But, yeah, but yeah, that's what this was. This was just a mismenu, and I fell just politely into the spikes.
And once again, like very small time loss there, just like the first death.
That was even less time lost than the chapter 3 death. I think that was like probably a little bit less than 2 seconds of a death.
Yep. All right. Whoa. Okay, that was sorry. Something was weird with the playback there for a second.
All right then.
Yeah. We'll just quickly like glaze over this one because we're running a bit long here. But basically, the thing here is you just go for like a crazy cycle in this boss, and probably one of the more potentially costly deaths too, just due to how long the room is. Is this something that you ever worry about, or just you've gotten it consistent enough?
I mean, I feel like there are points where like, sometimes sometimes I just go ahead and say, screw it, I'm gonna go for the more optimal strat. And this is one that I've done that so often where I've just got it consistent and it's fine now. But yeah, the bumper trick that I mentioned earlier, where you hold the direction to boost twice as far, I actually do that on this bumper too. These feathers also, you can move in 360 directions by using the analog stick. So you can see on the controller display that I'm actually using analog for the entirety of this feather flight. So and I'm not used to using analog like at all for anything else. So I'm essentially doing the bumper trick with analog, and it's pretty awkward, but it definitely it gets the job done when you do it right. So and I do an ultra dash as well off of the bumper, so I dash down and right, and that gets me more speed.
Just barely make that cycle. Neat. And then into chapter 7, this is where things really become, if somebody were competing, and again, like you've seen this yourself in comparing against the run, trying to improve it, this is where things really get hard to beat.
Yeah,
really get to an unbeatable kind of level.
Comparing against the summit is not fun for me in attempts, but yeah, this summit was my best summit ever. Actually, the best summit I've ever had in practice or otherwise.
I think Moose told us it's in fact the IL like record for summit, right?
It's not, in fact.
Close,
Flatterby has a high A23. This one's a very low A24, but it's like very, very close to the IL record.
Done in a run, in a world record run.
Yes. Yeah.
And insane.
With the death.
Well, with the death, that's
I died once in 3,000 meters, I think.
Yeah. Well, we're going to move. That was the next clip. So at flag 12 here,
you just focus on the deaths.
Of course, man.
Yeah, that's right.
We got to play every death in this run.
It's actually kind of impressive though with the deaths that you barely lost any time on. This is the one that you lost the most time on, and it was still minimal.
Yeah, exactly.
So I just didn't like touch the wall. I guess I luckily it wasn't too costly of a death again, just because the flag was right there. It was maybe a 2.5 second death, but
I would think, TGH, if anything, the fact that we can show all the deaths in this run just shows how good the run is, because there's so few to show that we can show them all.
That's another way to look at it for sure. That's true. But
well, that's pretty much what we got here for clips. I'm just going to click to a random spot in the full run now while we close out on that. But if you had to give us a quick summary, I don't know, chapter by chapter or whatever, where do you think I mean, as someone who is comparing to the splits daily, when you or anyone else is competing against it to try to get a new record, where are the time saves? Where are the splits where you're pretty much always going to lose time unless you're perfect?
I'd say the main time saves are the beginning, like the first 2 chapters, which I personally just kind of lump together into one like chapter in my head. I call it early game, like the first 3 minutes 40 seconds of the game. I'd say there's time to save there, probably 3-4 seconds, like realistically. Chapter 5, there's like almost 10 if you do 5A, and even more if you do 5B. But 5B, again, like notwithstanding right now, because we're focusing on the main chapters, I guess. And chapter 6, there's like 5 seconds realistically, and then chapter 7 is like, I mean, chapter 7 is an 8.5 minute long chapter, so like you'd be hard pressed to not find some time save there to be had. But it's it is
2-second death.
It is an 8.5 minute long chapter, so you're talking about that long. You're gonna be able to save some frames, but
you'd have to be pretty perfect to even compare with it right now, though, because with a death being only 1 second off the IL record for that's insane.
Yeah, so this run, I think in conclusion, like this run was a 29:21. My current sum of best, I think, is 28:43, and that includes 5B now as of just the other day. So, and even that can be improved. So like I could realistically have like a sub 28:40 sum of best. But if I do all the A sides, like sum of best is probably right around like 28:55-ish.
Wow.
So yeah, it's like, so I would say it's about 30 seconds from some of best, like around 30 seconds ballpark. But
that's nuts. Well, congratulations, dude, and like I'm excited to keep watching the chase because I know you're gonna knock it out of the park. Like you're gonna end up destroying it on some crazy run. Maybe it'll be against
Like tomorrow, probably.
right. Maybe it'll be against Vlad. Wish you good luck in the tournament finals, right?
Thanks. Yeah, let's see if I can get him back for.
For getting it in. Yeah.
But yeah, thank you guys. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it, and I'm sorry again to Moose who had internet troubles, but I'm happy to fill in for him.
Oh, we appreciate you filling in at literally the last second. Thank you very much, TGH.
No problem.
Yeah, thanks a lot. All right, well, with that, we're going to go to another quick break, and then we have just a few more segments at the end here. We ran a bit long with the technical difficulties and everything, but quick break so that everybody can get up, get a drink of water, snack, whatever you need to do. We'll run an ad or so during it. And yeah, we'll be back in just a moment. All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. Thanks for giving us a little break. We're probably going to have that during most shows after the world record analysis because it's a big, meaty analytical section. We want to give everybody the chance to get up and get some water, including ourselves. In my case, Red Bull. But we're going to move on to some more lighthearted segments here. And the first one that we're going to get is the tried and true, the fan favorite, the segment that people have been asking for in every episode of the Sprint. And that is, of course, Frozen's Freezer, man. So I'm going to go ahead just to explain what this is real quick. You know what? No, I'm just giving it to Frozen. Frozen, you explain to us what this segment is and tell us what's going on.
So Frozen's Freezer is where we're going to try to highlight some underutilized games that haven't either seen runs in a long time or games that should, based on what we've seen, get more of a spotlight. So this week, we've decided to highlight Neopets, the Darkest Fairy.
Oh,
now,
boy.
This is, just also FYI, I'm the only one of us three who has actually seen this run. These two, fresh out the gate, never seen anything. And it is an open world RPG based on Neopets. And within a minute, 20 seconds, you get directly to the out of bounds, jump right off, and just hop onto a ledge. It is a broken game.
I'm going to back this up so people can see this again because this is insane.
And so that clip could go on for another 30, 45 seconds easily. It just runs out, and that's it. That's this entire game. The entire game is just out of bounds tricks. Right here, he does it again. He jumps into the water, and he just casually walks through it. You're supposed to die when you go into the water, but water allows you to clip underneath the death box and immediately just walk right out of bounds again. And he then walks to a specific spot and jumps right back in bounds.
It looked like a pretty normal water walking animation to me.
Yeah, definitely. And then this is the major clip of the run.
The major? You mean these weren't major already?
No. This one you can utilize all over the place. You jump, you hang off of a ledge, and then you equip the cloak, and you unequip it, and then you can just fly. Just fly. So right here, this is a really cool one because he ledge flies, clips through the wall, obviously, because why not? Then he'll jump down here, and then he has to navigate completely in the dark. Nothing. Just can't use the map. He just has to, he doesn't know where he is. And there's water in the back somewhere here that will instantly kill him and set him back to where he was, which also, by the way, he was just fighting a boss. Technically, he was fighting a boss that he decided, no, I don't want to do that. I'm just going to skip right through it. Here, this is also a boss fight where you're supposed to escape, I believe. And instead, he knocks down a pillar and ledge flies away because that's it. This is the entire run. I'm telling you, this game could be broken. So I don't know if you guys know Abba Bob, back from the Wind Waker days. He did a lot of glitch hunting. He was there are only two runners of this game, Pokemon Rocks, which is this guy, and then Abba Bob. They broke this game, but with more runners in this game, and it's an open world RPG, or open world action adventure game, and this could be demolished with more people. It is crazy. The last time that the most recent run that was submitted was 2 years ago.
Oh.
So this is deep back in the freezer.
Oh, that's what I like to hear.
It is broken and a great watch, honestly.
Yeah, so it gets the Frozen's Freezer seal of approval.
On a scale of cold to Arctic, sub-zero temperatures, what would you rate this on the Frozen's Freezer scale?
I would say that it is Antarctic submarine, inside of an iceberg.
Okay. All right. It's pretty spicy.
Pretty cool.
I was going to say Mr. Freeze from Batman and Robin. It was.
See, that's why I'm not asking you.
Right. Well, thanks, Frozen, for that excellent segment.
This is great. This
love
segment
it.
is better than I could have ever hoped for.
I need to go and watch this immediately after. Remember, folks, we're going to be asking for feedback at the end too. So if you like Frozen's Freezer, please be sure to let us know. We're probably going to keep doing it anyways.
Yeah, because it was supposed to be a rotating segment, but it's kind of really fun.
Yeah, let's be real. You could say it's the worst segment ever. We still want to do it.
Yeah.
All right, and then got a couple more clips here. Actually, Darkman, why don't you kind of introduce our next segment here while I'm preparing these clips?
Sure.
Oh, I think you muted yourself for a moment, or is that on me?
Nope, that's on me because I had to update the segment. So as you can see the segment there, clips of the week. So, we thought kind of, end the show on a more lighthearted note. We would kind of take a few things that we've seen over the course of the past 2 weeks. Maybe something awesome happened, on a speedrunner's channel, maybe something funny, maybe something crazy, whatever is kind of like floating our boat. So we thought, let's just kind of show some clips off and see what we find. So, we thought for this week in particular, with the Games Done Quick Express happening, recently, we could find a couple of things there that might be quite entertaining. So, let me know, Hobbs, whenever you're ready, and I think we'll get right into it.
Yeah, this first one should be up on screen in just a moment. So, why don't you kind of introduce us to the first one here?
Sure. So we're doing the Boots one, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So our first one is from GDQX. We had a run of Super Metroid and Link to the Past, the randomizer. So what this is it's literally 2 games in one. So they actually go through certain sections of the game that is Link to the Past, and like all of a sudden they go through a section and they find themselves in Super Metroid. And the goal is to find all of the items that could be in either of the games. So like you can be in Super Metroid and you can find like a Link to the Past item. And so you have to go through both of these games. And you have to end up beating both sections. You have to kill Mother Brain. You have to defeat Ganon. That's how you beat this. So it's really neat, like having like 2 games in one, right? So this is a randomizer. So of course items are randomized throughout the entire segments. So you have to, you may need an item to get past a certain spot, and you have to kind of find that item amongst other places that you can find based on what you have. So now that you got the basic explanation, to kind of preface this clip. So Andy and Oats and Goats, the runners, so they about 2 hours into the run, they were about ready to beat the game. And then they were looking for a key, a big key in Ganon's tower. And that big key is what allows them to get to the end of the tower and kind of progress through the game. So the big key can be in a bunch of different spots. Well, it happened to be in this one spot they needed the boots for. They need to actually dash and like hit the key off the pedestal in order to get it. So now Andy is going on this great journey to find the boots, and he has been taking a long time. It's taken him like they've spent like over an hour. Like as you can see, like at around the 2-hour mark is when they first found that they needed the boots. Now we're at the 3-hour mark. So they've so now Andy is searching this, and he's found something. So let's listen to the clip and find out what happens.
All right. Oh. And see, okay, so funny thing about that chest, I specifically didn't do that one because I didn't have the boots, and it's lower without the boots.
You're real slow, Andy. Glad you saved those frames.
Sometimes you lose.
You win some, you lose some.
Yeah.
It's all right.
Sometimes the odds are in your favor and you lose anyways.
There we
go.
It's great because they have so much synergy together as well, and get along so well.
Yeah, so if that wasn't clear, if you didn't actually understand, Andy went on a wild goose chase for an hour when he could have actually just gone to the spot and gotten the boots. So, they basically just wasted an hour looking for these boots that he needed, and, it was there all along.
All right, we're going to roll into our next one. The only explanation this needs is that
it's Spike.
It's Spike. And
Yeah.
And if you're not familiar with the game on screen, the game is well, if it'll open. There we go. The game here that I'm trying to get to show up. Give me 1 second. Again, beta test, everybody.
That's
All
right.
The game here is Picross. The game that was on screen moments before this was Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. For some reason, Spike decided to play Picross during some technical issues, and now he's teaching the next runner how to play Picross live in front of about 70,000 people or so. Let's take a listen.
Then there's a nothing, and then there's another blue space somewhere. You don't know those either, though. Okay. Right here, we got 3 blues in a row. What can you deduce from that? There's 3 blues in a row. Can you deduce at all where one of those blue spaces could be? All right. So what I like to do here is I apply a thing called math. Okay. So math. Right. So, okay. So what you're going to do is you're going to take those 3, and then you're going to say there's 5 total. Then there's a nothing, and then there's another blue.
All right.
A little thing called math.
Yeah. There's something I like to use here. A thing called math.
Real newfangled stuff.
Oh, yeah. So just invented yesterday. New strat, math.
It's hard, man. Listen. As somebody who does not play Picross, I'm just looking at all these numbers on screen. I'm just like, what does this even mean?
I mean, that is true.
Like on top of that, he's learning this game on GDQ's grand stage, like in front of like 20 yellow cards. It's tough. All right, it's stressful. I can understand. Just being a little phased right there. Yeah, it was funny.
He took it in stride, though.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine the pressure learning a game live. Well, I guess Darkman, you've done that. You taught Jimmy Poopins how to speedrun Strider live.
That's true.
Yeah. But that was a game much less complicated than this one.
You're right.
No math involved.
Well, with that, folks, I think that's pretty much going to do it for us here. We've reached the ends of our segments here. This is a show, like we said, we're going to be doing this every 2 weeks. And we would absolutely love suggestions for stuff that you guys want to see, stuff you liked from today, things that you think could be improved. We already know that we're going to be working on improving some stuff on the production end and with layouts and kind of the flow of things, stuff like that. But we want to hear your feedback. We're going to post a form in the chat, I believe, as we kind of close out. Please let us know what you caught and what you liked and all that. And we'll see you in 2 weeks for the next episode.
We're going to post a link for submitting clips. If good clips that could be in this portion of the show, let us know, submit them, and we'll take a look. Might include them.
Yep, and yeah, like Cobb said, this is very much a kind of a beta test, kind of like flowing through things. The first few weeks as we kind of try to see what works and what doesn't. So we really appreciate your feedback. And we really appreciate your patience as we try to kind of figure this out. So, we'll see what works and what doesn't, kind of maybe change some things up. But eventually we'll find something that works, we think, maybe. But even so, some randomness, some different things happening, nothing wrong with that. So, yeah. Thank you very much, everybody, for watching our first show. I think that's going to do it for us.
Yeah.
Sorry, as a final reminder, for all of us, for everybody watching on YouTube, because yes, this video will be on YouTube, we'll be putting most of the links that we post in Twitch chat, we'll be putting in the description, so make sure you check that out.
All right, we hope you enjoyed the sprint. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Have a good time, guys.